She was called the most beautiful woman in movie history. Her eyes could mesmerize, her elegance could silence a room, and her performances still haunt audiences today. Yet, behind the dazzling image of Gene Tierney was a life filled with heartbreak, mental illness, and personal tragedy. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to Sajjad Classic for more untold stories of Hollywood's golden stars.
I was staring at you, wasn't I? I didn't mean to, really. It's only because you look so much like my father.
Jean Eliza Tierney was born on November 19, 1920, in Brooklyn, New York. The daughter of Howard Sherwood Tierney, a prosperous insurance broker, and Belle Lavinia Taylor, a former teacher. She was raised in an environment of privilege, where education, refinement, and culture were not just encouraged, but expected. Her family ensured she had every opportunity to grow into a polished young woman. From the very beginning, Jean's life was touched with elegance. She attended exclusive schools in Connecticut, where her teachers noted her intelligence, grace, and natural charisma. But her education didn't stop there. Her parents sent her abroad to Switzerland to attend finishing school, a rare privilege that shaped her into the epitome of sophistication. Living in Europe exposed her to art, languages, and cultural traditions that most American girls of her age could only dream of. She became fluent in French, and this fluency, paired with her already sharp mind, gave her an air of cosmopolitan charm. When she returned to the United States, Jean was no longer just another wealthy young woman. She carried herself with a poise and self-assurance that made her stand out in any gathering. Friends and family often remarked that her beauty was arresting, but it was her composure and elegance that made people remember her long after she had left the room. It wasn't long before her talent found a stage. In 1938, Jean began performing on Broadway, where she worked her way up from modest walk-on parts to more substantial roles. She appeared in Mrs. O'Brien Entertains and Ring 2, gradually attracting attention not only for her beauty, but also for her natural presence and charm. Her breakthrough came in 1940 with The Male Animal, where she played Patricia Stanley. Critics praised her, and suddenly Gene Tierney was more than a socialite with striking looks. She was a rising actress with genuine promise. Then fate intervened again. During a family vacation to California, the Tierneys visited Warner Brothers Studios, just another sightseeing stop for most tourists. But for Jean, it would change everything. Studio executives and directors were accustomed to seeing attractive young women pass through their gates. But Gene Tierney was different. Her striking green eyes, flawless bone structure, and dignified manner caught their attention instantly. One director, captivated by her presence, suggested that she should consider acting. At first, Jean was uncertain. She came from a conservative family, and Hollywood was not exactly considered a respectable profession. But the seed had been planted. Within months, 20th Century Fox signed her, and she was cast in her very first screen appearance, a small role as an extra in The Return of Frank James, 1940.
I want to be a newspaper woman. Now tell me about Frank James. If I can get a good story, maybe even my father will be convinced I can be a reporter. Won't you help me?
Gene Tierney played Eleanor Stone, a young and ambitious newspaper reporter. Eleanor is smart, inquisitive, and determined to make her mark in journalism, a profession not typically associated with women at the time. Through her character, Tierney brought a freshness and modern edge to the otherwise rugged Western tale. By 20th Century Fox's hand, Gene Tierney quickly went from unknown to one of Hollywood's brightest stars. She first gained attention in The Return of Frank James, 1940, opposite Henry Fonda, where her beauty and elegance made her stand out even in a modest role. This was Tierney's film debut, and while the role wasn't very large, critics and audiences noticed her striking screen presence. Reviewers at the time commented more on her beauty than her acting skill, But even then, some noted that she carried herself with poise beyond her experience. She may not have been the emotional center of the film, that was Henry Fonda's territory. But she added a touch of sophistication that balanced the film's rougher elements. Director Fritz Lang initially worried that Tierney's inexperience might affect the picture, but he later admitted she showed surprising confidence for a newcomer. The film was shot just months after Tierney had been spotted on Broadway, making it one of the fastest stage-to-screen transitions of that era. Eleanor Stone, her character, was modeled after real-life female journalists of the late 19th century, giving Tierney an unusually independent role for a Hollywood debutante actress. Though she had only a supporting role, her glowing presence convinced 20th Century Fox to push her quickly toward leading lady status. Tobacco Road.
Hey, love. Ain't you gonna give me just a bite, love?
She's got to behave herself. I'll tell her that...
Just one little bitty bite, love.
Ellie Mae, do you want to go?
Yes, Ma.
In 1941, John Ford brought Erskine Caldwell's controversial novel Tobacco Road to the screen. The story centered on the Lester family, dirt-poor sharecroppers in Georgia, struggling under the weight of generational poverty and social decay. Gene Tierney appears as Ellie Mae Lester, the Lester family's single daughter, naive, restless, and partly defined by the longing for a life that seems forever just out of reach. Because of the strict censorship rules of the Hays Code, the film version is tamer than Caldwell's original work, more suggestion than raw scandal. Ford, with screenwriter Nunnally Johnson, tried to preserve the grit of hardship, but softened much of the harshness. Critics at the time held mixed views. Some admired the film's atmosphere and its willingness to confront poverty. Others felt it was uneven, oscillating awkwardly between drama and rustic comedy, with less teeth than the stage play or novel. Variety commented that trying to clean up the Lesters took away some of the force that made the story powerful. The New York Times reviewer, Bosley Crowther, was particularly pointed. He called Tobacco Road a leisurely picnic with a batch of moldy Georgia crackers. The phrase captures how Crowther saw the film. Slow, indulgent in its portrait of rural misery, full of caricature more than intimacy. Yet he didn't entirely dismiss it. There was recognition that Ford was trying something difficult. As for Tierney's performance, it was still an early one, and her screen time was limited. But critics and viewers alike noticed her presence.
You can have Ellie Mae.
Oh, every time I say anything, you all want me to marry Ellie Mae. Well, it ain't no use. That's all there is to it.
Despite the makeup, costumes, and setting meant to degrade or humble characters, Tierney's poise and beauty made her stand out. She didn't have the emotional center stage that some others did, but she brought a grace to Ellie Mae that made the character more than just another figure in a harsh tableau. A few fun or surprising things. Though the story is bleak, the film includes touches of humor, rural absurdities, comedic relief from side characters that undercut some of the cruelty. Also, Tobacco Road was still running on Broadway when the film came out, and many critics compared the movie to the stage version, often saying the play had more bite and urgency. And financially, even with its mixed reception, the movie ended up doing well enough, partly because audiences were curious about how such a scandalous book had been adapted for the screen under the code. The Shanghai Gesture.
Bring me some brandy and sulphur for a change. Chase away the evil spirits. What right have you to command me? I have no more connection with you than with a toad out in the street. Mother, why don't you forget that litany? Somebody had to be my mother, but I can tell you one thing. If I had my choice, you'd be the last one on earth I'd pick. Mother Jen Sling.
In the same year, 1941, Gene Tierney took a bold leap forward with Joseph von Sternberg's exotic melodrama, The Shanghai Gesture. Here, she played Poppy Smith, a spoiled young English socialite whose idle curiosity leads her into the intoxicating, corrupt world of Shanghai's gambling dens. What begins as play quickly descends into moral collapse, and Poppy transforms from a bored ingenue into a woman consumed by obsession, jealousy, and ruin. For Tierney, it was a daring role that required her to shed the innocence she had shown in earlier films and explore the darker corners of human weakness. Critics were sharply divided. The New York Times reviewer, Bosley Crowther, described the picture as a lurid and often grotesque study in human degeneration, and while he wasn't entirely kind to the film's excesses, he acknowledged that Tierney brought youthful vitality to her role. Some reviewers noted that she was still raw as a performer, but others admired her willingness to take on such a risky, unsympathetic part so early in her career. Unlike in Tobacco Road, where her beauty seemed out of place in the mud and poverty, here her elegance made the fall from grace more shocking. There are also fascinating bits of trivia around the Shanghai Gesture. The censors forced von Sternberg to tone down the novel's original themes of sex trafficking and opium. But even in its softened form, the film was one of the most risque productions of its time. The role of Poppy was initially considered for Rita Hayworth, but producer Arnold Pressburger insisted on Tierney, believing her freshness and refinement would make the character's descent all the more tragic. The gamble worked. Though not universally praised, the performance gave Tierney credibility as more than just another pretty face. It showed that she could hold the screen in a story of decadence and destruction, standing alongside veterans like Ona Munson and Walter Huston without fading into the background. China Girl, 1942.
Whatever I do, my spirit will belong to you forever.
I don't want your spirit.
It's best that way. Return to your places, all of you.
Role, Captain China, who becomes the love interest of George Montgomery. Reviews were mixed, but many felt Tierney gave the exotic role dignity and allure rather than playing into stereotypes. Tierney herself disliked being cast in exotic roles, believing the studio was relying too heavily on her looks instead of her acting. Heaven Can Wait.
To live in New York. I don't want to say anything against Kansas, but life on my father's estate. Don't misunderstand me. We have all the modern conveniences and luxuries, but oh, you don't know Father and Mother.
Well, I've only just met them.
Don't you think they're sweet?
Well, yes, very sweet.
Yes, they are. But it's not very easy to live with them.
In 1943, Gene Tierney stepped into the sophisticated world of Ernst Lubitsch with Heaven Can Wait, a Technicolor romantic comedy that perfectly showcased her charm and refinement. She played Martha Strabel Van Cleve, the witty and devoted wife of Henry Van Cleve, portrayed by Donna Meche. The story unfolds in flashback as Henry recounts his long, mischievous life to the devil himself, and through those memories, Martha emerges as the quiet anchor, the woman whose love gives meaning to Henry's otherwise frivolous existence. This was a turning point for Tierney. Under Lubitsch's meticulous direction, she revealed warmth, humor, and intelligence that critics felt elevated her beyond the decorative beauty label she had carried in earlier roles. The New York Times praised the film as a warm and witty comedy with a rare understanding of human nature. And while Donna Meche received much of the spotlight, Tierney was singled out for her radiant presence and natural elegance. Her performance was noted for being both regal and tender, embodying what many saw as the very essence of Lubitsch's famed touch. Audiences adored her in the role, and so did Lubitsch himself. He once remarked that Gene could make an entrance like a queen and laugh like a child, a combination he believed made her irresistible on screen. The film became a critical and commercial success, earning an Academy Award nomination for Best Picture and firmly establishing Tierney as a leading lady capable of carrying weighty, sophisticated parts. There's also a touch of trivia that adds to the film's charm. The wardrobe department designed an array of elaborate gowns for Tierney, emphasizing her aristocratic beauty in nearly every scene. Yet, despite the costumes and grand settings, it was her natural sparkle and poise that captivated audiences. For Gene, Heaven Can Wait was not just another credit on her resume. It was the role that proved she had the comedic timing, emotional depth, and sophistication to take her place among Hollywood's true stars. Laura.
Her career began with my endorsement of the pen. I secured other endorsements for her, introduced her to important clients. I gave her her start. But it was her own talent and imagination that enabled her to rise to the top of her profession. I selected a more attractive hairdress for her. I taught her what clothes were more becoming to her. Through me, she met everyone, the famous and the infamous. She had authentic magnetism. Wherever we went, she stood out. Men admired her. Women envied her. She became as well known as Waldo Lydeck's walking stick. These were the best nights.
What difference does it make what I say? You've made up your mind I'm guilty. Thanks. No, I didn't kill Diane Redfern.
In 1944, Gene Tierney reached the pinnacle of her stardom with Laura, a film noir masterpiece directed by Otto Preminger. She played Laura Hunt, the elegant advertising executive whose portrait and memory haunt the men who loved her, police detective Mark McPherson, Dana, Andrews, her snobbish mentor Waldo Lydecker, Clifton Webb, and her fiancé, Vincent Price. The film begins as an investigation into her supposed murder, but gradually becomes a story of obsession, mystery, and love that transcends even death. Tierney's performance was extraordinary, not for fiery theatrics, but for restraint and enigma. She gave Laura an aura of mystery, poised, intelligent, and alluring, yet always slightly out of reach. Leave her to heaven.
Alice! Alice! Help me!
Sometimes the truth is wicked. You're afraid of the truth, aren't you, Ruth?
In 1945, Gene Tierney stunned audiences with Leave Her to Heaven, taking on the role of Ellen Barrett Harland, a woman whose beauty was matched only by her obsessive possessiveness. Ellen is charming, elegant, and utterly captivating. But beneath that polished surface lurks jealousy and a chilling willingness to control the life of her husband, Richard Harland, played by Cornell Wilde. Tierney's performance was electrifying. She moved seamlessly between warmth and menace, making Ellen both mesmerizing and terrifying. Critics were captivated. The New York Times praised her as bewitching and merciless, noting the rare ability she had to make audiences simultaneously root for and fear her character. The film became a box office sensation, and Tierney earned her only Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. But what made this role particularly memorable were the little behind-the-scenes details. The studio initially worried that audiences might reject her as a villainous heroine, yet Tierney's charisma and screen magnetism transformed Ellen into one of cinema's most unforgettable femmes fatales. She reportedly studied the nuances of obsessive behavior to make Ellen's jealousy both believable and compelling, and she worked closely with costume designers to ensure her elegance never wavered, even in the film's most dramatic moments. It was her fearless embrace of a morally complex character, combined with meticulous preparation, that made Ellen Barrett Harland a role for the ages, solidifying Tierney's reputation as one of Hollywood's most versatile and magnetic stars. The Razor's Edge.
I marry you when I had the chance? I could have. You know I could have. That last night in Paris, you were ready enough to give up all this foolishness for me. If I just had brains enough, I could have saved you. But no, I threw you out. I thought I was being so noble, remember?
In 1946, Gene Tierney took on a completely different challenge with The Razor's Edge, an adaptation of W. Somerset Maugham's acclaimed novel. She played Isabel Bradley, a glamorous socialite whose elegance and sophistication conceal a certain shallowness and self-absorption. Unlike her mesmerizing and morally complex role in Leave Her to Heaven, Isabel is charming yet shallow, representing the superficial world contrasted against Larry Darrell's Cornell Wilde spiritual quest. Tierney's performance, however, brought depth and nuance to a character that could have easily been dismissed as merely vain. Critics noted her ability to convey subtle layers of insecurity beneath the surface polish. The New York Times praised her for her magnetic presence and refined poise, highlighting how she made Isabel both alluring and believable. Behind the scenes, Tierney invested deeply in the role, studying upper-class manners, social etiquette, and the subtleties of dialogue delivery to capture Isabel's world authentically. She collaborated closely with costume designers to ensure her wardrobe reflected the character's sophistication and privilege, which became an integral part of her performance. Even though Isabel was not the protagonist, Tierney's screen presence elevated the character, ensuring that audiences remembered her long after the film ended. The Razor's Edge reinforced Tierney's versatility, proving she could handle complex character-driven dramas just as well as suspenseful thrillers or romantic melodramas, and cemented her reputation as one of Hollywood's most compelling leading ladies. Dragonwyck.
I dreamt that I dwelt in marble halls, with vassals and serfs at my side, and of all who assembled within those walls, that I was the hope and the pride.
My dreams came true, Ma. Can't you see? Ever since I was a little girl and built a castle in an apple tree.
In 1946, Gene Tierney took on one of her most atmospheric roles in Dragonwyck, a Gothic drama directed by Joseph L. Mankiewicz. She played Miranda Wells, a farmer's daughter whose life changes when she is invited to live with wealthy relatives at the foreboding Dragonwyck estate. Initially innocent, wide-eyed, and eager to embrace a world of refinement, Miranda becomes trapped in a dark, oppressive marriage to the enigmatic Nicholas Van Ryn, played by Vincent Price. Tierney's performance was marked by her ability to balance youthful naivety with a growing sense of dread. As Miranda, she embodied both the dream of romance and the crushing reality of entrapment in a loveless and sinister household. Critics at the time praised her delicate beauty and quiet strength, noting that she gave the Gothic melodrama a layer of humanity.
Miranda, is it true?
Yes, are you glad? And now may I have Peggy as a reward, if nothing else? Have I done something to please you at last? Nicholas, let me help.
I don't need to be helped.
Help me, then. Please don't shut me out like this. Let me be unhappy with you and happy again. Let me be part of you.
The New York Times remarked that Tierney brought a touching sincerity to the role, though some reviewers felt the film leaned more on atmosphere than on her acting range. Still, her presence anchored the film, making Miranda's descent into disillusionment believable and poignant. A fascinating bit of trivia surrounds her casting. The role of Miranda was originally intended for Jennifer Jones, but Gene Tierney was chosen instead, giving her a rare chance to step into the Gothic romance genre. The Ghost and Mrs. Muir.
You'll forgive me if I take a moment to get accustomed to you.
My dear, never let anyone tell you to be ashamed of your figure.
In 1947, Gene Tierney captivated audiences once again in Joseph L. Mankiewicz's The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, playing Lucy Muir, a young widow who moves into a secluded seaside house and encounters the ghost of its former occupant, the brooding Captain Daniel Gregg, Rex Harrison. Lucy is intelligent, courageous, and independent, a woman of her time seeking both freedom and love. Tierney brought a delicate balance to the role, portraying Lucy's vulnerability and strength with equal grace, making the audience root for her emotional journey, even as she fell for a man who existed only in spirit. Critics were enchanted by her performance. The New York Times described the film as a fantasy enriched by the luminous presence of Miss Tierney, whose elegance and charm illuminate every frame. Reviewers admired her ability to convey genuine emotion while navigating the unusual technical demands of acting opposite a spectral co-star. It was a testament to her skill that the character never felt contrived, despite the film's supernatural premise. Behind the scenes, Tierney faced unique challenges. Many scenes required her to interact with an invisible co-star, relying on precise eye lines and timing to make the romance believable. She reportedly spent hours rehearsing to perfect these interactions, ensuring her reactions appeared natural and spontaneous. Additionally, her wardrobe and styling were meticulously designed to reflect Lucy's evolving emotional state, from cautious widowhood to romantic awakening. The combination of Tierney's nuanced performance, Mankiewicz's direction, and the film's ethereal cinematography created a timeless classic. The Ghost and Mrs. Muir not only delighted audiences, but also reinforced Tierney's status as one of Hollywood's most versatile and captivating leading ladies, capable of blending charm, sophistication, and heartfelt emotion in every role she played. Never Let Me Go.
I have love for Philippe. I have the wish to be his wife and to be together with him always. You will tell us, no, no, but we say, yes, yes. And then you will say, как сказать, молодое дурни дурачок?
Dashed young fools.
Then you will say, dashed young fools, good luck. No? Yes?
Not as simple.
In 1953, Gene Tierney starred in Never Let Me Go, a Cold War-era romantic drama set against the backdrop of Soviet Russia. She played Maria Lamarkina, a beautiful Russian ballerina whose life becomes entangled with an American journalist, played by Clark Gable. Their romance is filled with passion, but it is shadowed by political oppression and the looming threat of separation, as Maria struggles under the weight of a regime that dictates not only art, but love itself. Tierney's performance carried a quiet intensity. Her Maria was graceful and reserved, reflecting the discipline of a ballerina, but also fragile under the suffocating restrictions of her world. Critics admired her elegance, even if the film itself drew mixed reviews. The New York Times noted that while the story leaned heavily on melodrama, Tierney brought a haunting dignity to her role, elevating what might otherwise have been a routine romance into something more poignant. Reviewers often praised the chemistry between Tierney and Gable, remarking that her calm strength provided the perfect balance to Gable's rugged determination. Trivia adds an interesting layer to this film. Though Tierney played a ballerina, she was not a trained dancer. Her dance sequences were staged with doubles and clever camera work, but her statuesque beauty and graceful carriage convinced audiences of her authenticity. It was also one of her later major roles before her struggles with mental health began pulling her away from Hollywood, giving the film an added sense of bittersweetness when revisited today. The Left Hand of God, 1955. In The Left Hand of God, 1955, Gene Tierney played Anne Scott, a mission nurse working in a remote Chinese outpost who begins to suspect the mysterious stranger, played by Humphrey Bogart, is not the priest he pretends to be. Tierney brought warmth and compassion to the role, her quiet presence balancing Bogart's hardened, secretive character. Critics at the time noted that while the film itself was uneven, Tierney's performance gave it a human core. The New York Times praised her graceful restraint, observing how she softened the edges of a tense, sometimes grim story. But behind the elegance audiences saw on screen, Gene was fighting private battles. By 1955, her mental health was already fragile. Though she delivered a serene and poised performance, colleagues later remembered moments when she seemed distant and withdrawn once the cameras stopped. What the public didn't know was that Tierney was showing the early signs of what would later be diagnosed as bipolar disorder. Just a year later, while preparing for Moby Dick, her illness overwhelmed her, forcing her into treatment and a long retreat from Hollywood. Trivia. Tierney often said she felt especially protective of this role because it mirrored her own state at the time. a woman trying to keep calm and steady while the world around her threatened to collapse. Like many Hollywood stars, Tierney's love life was closely followed by gossip columnists. One of her most famous romances was with John F. Kennedy, then a young congressman. The relationship was passionate, but short-lived. Kennedy, still mapping out his political future, bluntly told her he could not marry an actress, fearing it would damage his career. Gene was heartbroken, though she would later speak of him with respect and admiration. Her other relationships, however, sparked more scandal. She was linked romantically to Prince Ali Khan, notorious for his playboy reputation and also known for his marriage to actress Rita Hayworth. Their romance fed tabloid frenzy, but like many of her relationships, it fizzled under pressure. Another scandal arose in 1943 when Howard Hughes, the eccentric millionaire and Hollywood producer, entered her life. Hughes was infatuated with Tierney, lavishing her with gifts and attention. Although she never returned his love, Hughes remained devoted to her. Ironically, he would later play an unexpected role in her life. After she fell into deep depression years later, Hughes quietly helped cover her medical bills during treatment, an act of compassion that surprised many. But perhaps the most shocking scandal tied to Tierney's name came not from romance, but from her daughter's disability. Years later, a fan confessed to her that during the pregnancy, she had escaped quarantine for rubella just to meet her favorite actress, an admission that horrified Tierney, who now knew exactly where the infection had come from. This encounter was dramatized decades later in an episode of The Twilight Zone, The Starlet, inspired by Tierney's real-life tragedy. These personal struggles, combined with the pressures of stardom, pushed Tierney into a battle with severe depression and bipolar disorder. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, as her career reached new heights, her mental health began to decline. She underwent repeated hospitalizations and even received electroshock therapy, a common but brutal treatment of the era. Tierney later wrote candidly about the trauma of these treatments in her memoir, describing memory loss and emotional distress. In 1957, she shocked Hollywood by walking away from films, determined to seek peace and stability away from the cameras. It wasn't until the 1960s that she made sporadic returns, but by then her stardom had dimmed, overshadowed by the tragedies she endured. In her later years, Tierney lived away from the Hollywood spotlight. Sadly, decades of heavy smoking led to chronic emphysema. On November 6, 1991, she passed away in Houston, Texas at the age of 70, just 13 days shy of her 71st birthday. Gene Tierney was more than a vision of beauty. She was a woman of depth and vulnerability whose life reflected both the glamour and the hidden cost of fame. Behind her unforgettable performances and elegance on screen lay heartbreak, illness, and loss, reminding us that even the brightest stars carry shadows. Her journey from dazzling siren to a woman fighting for peace of mind makes her story haunting, human, and forever unforgettable. Thank you for spending this time with us at Sajjad Classic. If Gene's story touched you, I invite you to subscribe and join us as we uncover more of Hollywood's hidden stories, legends, and untold truths. Because every star, no matter how glamorous, has a story that deserves to be remembered.